All right, good evening, everybody. We're gonna call the meeting to order. It's 6:32. First order of business is present to speak. Is there anyone on the call that would like to speak up? Just unmute yourself and tell us who you are and where you live, and we'd love to hear from you. All right, we will have another opportunity at the end of the meeting for a present to speak. So chairperson report. So the first update we have is the town meeting was Monday night. And I'm happy to report that the additional 100,000 that we requested in the town meeting was approved. 39 yeses and 20 noes. So now that money will be allocated to the account for us to continue with our efforts. Next item is the first public presentation that was had on November 9th. I believe most of our members were in attendance to that, and Phil did a great job explaining the work that we've done. Yes, the work that we've done and the background efforts that were made from our owner's project manager with respect to, you know, where we started and the research that the entire committee has done. So I believe we're going to have more public sessions very similar to that presentation, but maybe with some additional information. So if you haven't had a chance for anybody, I think most of our members were there, but if anybody else on the call, if you haven't had a chance to look at that presentation, it is available online on our website and on the town website as well. Hi, Peter.
Good evening, all. Sorry to be late.
No problem. So next item under my chairman's report. So we actually started these committee meetings back in January of 21. And I was lucky enough to have this position as the chairperson, but I am resigning as of the end of this year. I will remain on the committee as a member, but the chairperson position will be back up for anybody who wants to step in and take the torch and move us through the rest of this process. If you want to add to that.
Sure, so that certainly leaves us with a bit of housekeeping to do. So once the position is vacant, which sounds like it'll be our first meeting in January, we'll need to elect a chair from our membership. This is probably a good opportunity for us to discuss whether or not, like some boards, we want a little bit broader leadership base, right? So several boards and commissions have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary, and that can actually do, that can help to spread out some of the duties, right? So a lot of the items that need to be done have been the responsibility of Catherine, and I think she's taking that on very well. But there could be tasks such as, you know, reviewing the minutes that's done by the secretary of this committee, and then puts them forward to the rest of the commission to take a little bit of that off the chairperson. In the event a chairperson can't be at a meeting, we have a vice chair, so we know who's going to run the meeting. The couple of times Catherine hasn't been able to attend, she's asked me to fill in. And while I'm happy to do that, I think it wouldn't be inappropriate for us to think about having a vice chair on this committee so that it's clear in the absence of a chair who would run our meetings. I think that's valid and appropriate. And so I guess I'd like some input from this committee for us to talk about that. This gives us a good opportunity to say, should we just, you know, beef up our leadership roles? I saw Ralph nodding his head. I'd be curious to hear your input.
Quite honestly, I've wondered why we haven't had a vice chair. I think it would be appropriate Again, as you said, to give the primary chair a break when necessary, or when personal obligations get in the way of a meeting, which like it or not, I think that happens to all of us.
Yeah, I agree. So maybe that's something we could, we get to future agenda, we can kind of put on a future agenda, and this membership can look at those roles and elect them. And, you know, certainly Catherine, if you wanted to have discussion, if we wanted to add the topic to this meeting, we could. That's my 2 cents, and this seems a good opportunity. While I'm sad to see Catherine leave her role, I think she's guided us to this point and done a fantastic job at leading us. I understand when personal commitments lead to us needing to step back a little bit, but I do appreciate that she's still willing to serve the committee while not being able to take on the responsibilities of the chair.
Well,
So thank you.
And likewise, this has been a great experience. I've never chaired a meeting like this, a town meeting before, so this has done plenty of other meetings, but this is different. And I've enjoyed it, and I'll take this experience moving forward, so. All right, next order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes. So we have 3 sets of meeting minutes that were sent out to the committee. We've got the SPC regular meeting minutes from our November 2nd. And then we have our meeting minutes from last Wednesday. I think was it Wednesday? Yeah. Last Wednesday, the November 9th. We had 2 meetings that day. The 6:30 meeting was a brief meeting, and then the 7 o'clock meeting, which essentially was the presentation that we had. So we can do a bulk, or we should do individual.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from our November 2nd regular meeting as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, let's take a vote to approve the meeting minutes of November 2nd, 2022. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, minutes approved. Next set of meeting minutes is the November 9th, 6:30 PM meeting. There a motion on the table on the floor?
I'll move the November 9th, 6:30 special meeting minutes.
A second, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ralph. Any discussion?
My only discussion is it should be, oh, no, never mind. Says special meeting. What's that?
Okay, any discussion? Brianna, did I see your hand up?
No, ma'am.
Okay, any discussion on the 11/9, 6:30 PM meeting minutes?
Is that Ralph the second?
Yes. Hearing none, let's take a vote. So all in favor of approving the special meeting minutes of November 9th, the 6:30 PM, say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Meeting minutes approved for the 6:30 meeting. Next special meeting minutes was also on the 9th. This is the 7 PM meeting, which is also the community outreach presentation. Is there a motion?
I'll move
So
to
mo-
approve a 7 PM 11/9 meeting minutes as presented.
So Erica, is there a second? Anne?
Yes, I
any-
will second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Ralph?
Attached to the minutes were a bunch of community questions and comments. Has anyone reviewed these to determine whether or not there's something there that requires a response from this committee? I know there were answers that were penciled in on a couple of them, but I have not had a time to thoroughly go through them.
think, I felt like there were some that, we didn't answer, and so we will need to, and so our response during the meeting was to be determined. And from my perspective, Ralph, a lot of those, we still haven't determined enough that we would be answering right now, maybe tonight, potentially at future presentations.
I think we should try to carry that forward to our next meeting, or the next time we organize a public presentation, to make sure that we cover everything that we can, just
Yeah, I
for the
think we-
public's benefit.
Yeah, Ralph, that's a good point, because I think we did talk about that at the initial stages of putting the presentation together, that we would be collecting all these questions and answers and hopefully improving the next presentation so that people get their responses. But there definitely needs to be follow-up, I think.
And I think there were, a good number of them that were questions that would be answered by either our superintendent or the Board of Education. Not necessarily, so we, would need to defer to them to be able to respond in future presentations, so.
Correct. And I agree, Erica, but it would be good to pass those questions on to the Board of Ed if they can adequately respond to the question, so that as a committee, we can get their input to respond at our next public presentation.
And I have no doubt our superintendent will work to answer those questions. And Anne, you, as a member representing the Board of Ed, would that not be something you discuss?
Well, we have a couple of Board of Ed people here, so maybe they can make sure that these things get carried through.
Okay, Ralph, will do.
Other than that, I have no other comments.
Okay, any other discussion on the 7 PM, 11/9 meeting minutes before we take a vote? We will have an opportunity to actually talk about the presentation further down on the agenda. Yeah, so if there's no comments, we'll move to a vote. So all in favor of approving the SBC special meeting minutes of 11/9, the 7 PM, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Meeting minutes of 7 PM, November 9th are approved. Next item, communications. So in our last meeting, we had a letter of intent that we all reviewed, and it was signed by the property owner, and a letter was given to the Board of Selectmen's office today and has been tentatively signed. It's not officially signed with the town yet, but it has been signed. So that letter of intent is fully executed.
I would say it's signed, it just hasn't been filed. All contracts have to be filed in the town clerk's office, so that part hasn't happened because the signing came after the town clerk left for the day.
So was it signed by our selectmen?
It was signed by a selectman, yes,
Not Erica.
not myself.
I understand
It was
that.
signed by a selectman, yes.
Who was it?
Liza?
Oh, okay. I was curious. We only have two others.
And that was the advice of our attorney, is that I said clearly that I would not sign such a document because of a clear conflict. And that the attorney's advice was that it be one of the other two selectmen sign on behalf of the town. So that's what we've done.
So next item is the-
Catherine, hey Catherine,
I'm sorry,
just
go-
this is Bill, sorry, I just wanted to let you know there, I did get into the SBC email account. I will be sharing with you, there's an email from a community member asking a question. I'll forward that to you, it was from November 1st. And I
Okay.
just saw that tonight, so I'll share it and we can share that out in the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Phil.
Just a question, Catherine. Want to go back and listen to some of the questions. Was there an audio recording of our public input session, or whatever we're calling it?
I listened to it and I
Did
did
you
not.
listen to it?
Yeah, I did. I
Was
did
it hard to
not.
hear?
I did not hear the question and answer
Oh, God,
session.
then I'll never hear it.
However, I think Scott Pellman took some notes.
I took notes too, but
And,
I was just wanting to go.
In the video, you couldn't hear it?
Yeah, the question and answer session.
Did
I
you,
don't think
is it on
recorded.
YouTube?
Yeah,
It's a whole record, it was,
Like all our town meetings are?
yes, yeah,
Did you hear the audio?
I didn't go back and watch it,
I
no.
was curious.
I-
to
yeah,
hear it
I-
clearly. I struggle I had trouble hearing the entire evening in the gym, just being there.
Yeah, I do know a couple of people who were at the event, and I suppose maybe we can talk about it when we get to that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
any other questions before we move on? We're gonna
Ralph has
move
his
on.
hand
to-
up.
Okay, Ralph?
Well, maybe it's better left to item 7AI.
Yep, we'll get there pretty quickly, I think.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. All right, so let's jump into subcommittee reports. As you know, we have 3 subcommittees: communications, land assessment, and finance. If we could get a quick update, if you haven't met, just let us know that you haven't met. Or if you do have potential plans for meeting, let us know that too. So communications subcommittee,
We have not met, but perhaps we should take a look at some of the questions. That
Okay.
might be, between that and the Board of Ed.
Yeah.
We'll-
That's a
we'll
great
look at those
idea.
Questions, okay.
possibly those could be added to the FAQs sheet and then we can republish that.
Yeah.
Land assessment committee, I know Mike isn't here today, but Ralph, you got your hand up.
Well, actually, it was for communications. If Phil had just noted that the email, that the SBC email account had a message from November 1. It's now November 16. Are we not following that as closely as we should be? And moving on to a land assessment, we have not met, so.
Okay. Thank you. I know there was some email hiccup with the town emails, Ralph. I'm not gonna blame it all on that, but I do know there was an issue with the emails.
Yeah, some of it had to do with, we separated the town and the Board of Ed, and after that process, the Board of Ed underwent a kind of change on their side over, and I think that's where the hiccup happened, and so I think it's clear that that's fixed now, so if not, I'm sure Phil was on it. I know we were talking with IT about it.
I just think it behooves the committee to be very aggressively following public questions. And
And
addressing
Ralph,
them.
we are, when you
we
realize
have them.
nothing's new in that inbox.
Right.
It makes you question, is there nothing new, or is it not coming in? And because we had some of these IT changes, that's when it got looked at.
I understand. I just, as a general rule, I think it would be good to aggressively follow it. So at least from public perception standpoint, we are listening, we are paying attention, we are responding.
Okay, thank you for the update on the land assessment. Finance subcommittee,
We have not met other than appearing at various board meetings, but I think we will need to meet, and I'm wondering, Scott, because I know you're gonna be preparing costing for town bonding and so forth, as you laid out in your presentation. If I can schedule a meeting around some preliminary numbers you may have there. If you could address that in your later agenda.
The bonding, Peter, is actually being calculated through the town. Those are not calculations that Colliers can provide, but I know Phil has started to work with the town to start generating the cost to the taxpayers and the bonding costs.
Understood. I suspect we'll want to meet to discuss those.
And Peter, as soon as Phil and I were working with our business manager to take a look at those numbers.
Horrible experience that must be.
I think it's fine. I won't tell her that you said that. But no, so once we get that information, we'll bring it into the conversation.
Thank you.
we do have an updated report. I don't know if that's, I know it was passed out like in paper at the town meeting. Do we have an electronic version that maybe we can send that to the, did we send that to the entire committee already?
We haven't. I don't know if we have in the past, but the number hasn't,
Was that just the sheet that we had in
Yeah,
Scott's presentation?
yeah.
I have that.
yeah, and the balance hasn't,
But-
the available balance hasn't changed, the encumbrance and the year to date, there's been some updates since October 20th. But the available balance is still $12,411.90, that's unencumbered.
$12,000.
That's about to change.
$11.90.
That's about to change, right?
So,
Okay, so did everybody hear the balance that we currently have? This is before the,
Town meeting.
right, before the town meeting, we have a balance of $12,411.90.
So is the, can we assume the business office is going to update our balance?
yes.
So I don't want to ask that question.
I can tell you I didn't ask that since Monday, and that main reason being, the auditors are here this week, so it is, like many other times during the year, a crazy time in the
I was
office,
told
but I
that in
have,
uncertain terms.
yeah, don't bother me unless it's necessary.
I found that the
So,
hard way.
yeah, so, we know that as of, Monday, we had the 100,000, and I have no doubt that it will be properly, accounted for in our budget, and so we'll touch base, with our business manager.
Yeah, I think it'll be important to know when that funding is available, because further down the agenda, we do have a couple items that we'd like to spend against that. So we just need to know when the
I
funding.
mean, I would
is
say from a
available.
procedural perspective, the funding is available.
I would-
It's a matter of.
I would agree.
Whether or not it's gonna show up on the report immediately, which, as soon as she makes the adjustment there. But, from a procedural standpoint, it's
We can
part of our
act.
balance.
We can
Okay.
act.
Yeah, I
We've
guess
been given
that's
the
what I'm-
proper
Yeah,
authority.
I'm thinking
Yeah,
that, right.
yeah, we've been given the proper authority. It's a good
Okay.
question to ask, but yeah, we have the proper authorities and checked all the boxes.
So any votes that we have moving forward regarding funding would be acceptable.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you for those updates. Item 7, old business, owner's project manager, Collier's update. Go ahead,
Thank
Scott.
you. Good evening, everyone. Scott Hellman, Collier's project leaders. As Catherine noted, after the presentation last Wednesday, I was doing my best to capture the question responses that were provided during the meeting. I did forward that on, last Thursday or Friday to Catherine and Phil. They weren't meant to be complete, accurate transcripts, but I tried to capture the general questions and responses that were provided. It did appear that, a good portion of the questions were focused more on academics than necessarily the project itself, or a number of those were. But normally what we do is, exactly what you're talking about, is capturing those questions, formalizing formal responses to the questions. And then typically at the next presentation, that's kind of the first thing out the gate, is you say, these are questions that we captured at the last meeting. Here are the responses, and then you go into the new information. It's a good format to get those questions addressed up front and then proceed on. And as we just sort of talked about briefly, I do know that the town is beginning to work on some of the taxpayer costs, and certainly that will be a big aspect of one of the forthcoming meetings. I know it's handled under new business, but just as a quick overview, since we met and had the presentation last week, Phil, Catherine, and I met with Lynn Wiley from Eagle Environmental. You probably saw, or hopefully you saw in your inboxes, Lynn sent a proposal at 4:45 today. I have not had a chance to really review it in depth, just to do some additional testing on the site, and that'll be talked about under new business. I've also put together a updated milestone schedule that anticipates a number of additional community meetings, tracks building committee meetings, and some of the other critical tasks and decision points we have to make to be able to maintain the current schedule that was presented to the public, which either provides for a 2026 school opening, if it's a new project, or a 2027 project completion lesson auditorium, if the project is on the Hall Memorial site. Again, I will be going over that in new business. And I guess before I get on to, I also have drafted up an RFQ, RFP for architectural concept planning. I did also send that off to Catherine earlier today. I know that's the next agenda topic. But before I get into that, I'll stop here and allow the discussions to continue under item 8.1.
Can I ask
Yeah,
a
go
question? And the question I have is kind of a follow-up from one of the questions that's come out of our presentation. If we were to, if this committee were to choose and take forward the project at Hall School, with or without the auditorium, both of those projects are more in cost than the new school, new site. There have been some conversation about there being additional penalties in reimbursement for choosing the more expensive option. Is that correct, Scott? Is that typical?
It's not a penalty per se. It's if it's not, the state doesn't pay if you're replacing or repairing existing components of a building. So for example, your brick repointing, replacing all your electrical fixtures, upgrading your plumbing fixtures, all those would be replacements or repairs of existing features. They won't pay for those unless you apply, and this would be after your grant was submitted, you apply for renovation status and renovation status is granted. However, statutorily, one of the big factors there is you have to provide, as part of that request package, information that states that the renovation project would be cheaper than building new.
So from the cost estimates that you provided to us now that we're bringing to taxpayers for them to help us make a decision and then take to referendum, will that number change, or will it go up or go down based on those factors?
The numbers assumed that you would not be able to achieve renovation status. So I don't anticipate those changing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions regarding the update that Collier's provided? Anne?
Going back to that renovation status, then would they recalculate it so that if we were granted renovation status, then the price would go down because the state would cover more, or no?
The overall price stays the same. It's just you would get more money from the state, less money from the community. So if you look at the columns on the financial slide that was presented, there's a column of the estimated cost support from the state, and then the column to the right of that was the town's portion, what it would cost the town. And we did that both as the base project without getting a space waiver. And then again, we talked about it. We've had the discussions with the state. They recognize the fact that their system for calculating space standards for these small schools that are wide grade ranges is flawed. And they have again, but unfortunately they can't tell us what they'll do for us. They won't allow us to submit that request prior to submitting a grant. But the other half of that page then calculated what the state cost would be if a space waiver was granted, and what the town cost would be if the space waiver was granted. And then the only sort of little niche in that we talked about is the state will only pay for half of the auditorium. It's sized right now for 425 approximately. Your student population is 420. They will only pay for an auditorium that seats 210. So when in the calculations that we've provided, we noted that on that spreadsheet, stating that we're assuming half of no matter what, half of that auditorium would not be reimbursed by the state.
So if we go back to the state considering the two numbers, right, they are going to use that renovation number that we have right now when they're deciding if the renovation is less expensive than the new building.
No, the state is not going to decide that for you. You need to choose an option.
Okay.
You need to choose an option and take it to the people for a vote. And then if the vote is successful, then you file your grant application. After that, then you can go for a space waiver. But unfortunately, the state won't acknowledge or won't join with us in any meaningful discussions until a grant is filed. But the state is not going to determine what your project is. So what we're trying to do is we're laying out the parameters, the statutes, what the state goes by, giving you the basis where, this committee from, after all, they get all the input from the taxpayers and the community, needs to then make a decision on what project to choose to go to referendum.
So is it a statute that states that the renovation must be less expensive than a new building?
If you want renovation status, now the state will allow you to come with an alteration extension project that's more expensive than building new, if you so choose, if that's the project you choose. But you're not going to get reimbursed from the state on all the repair and the replacement. So
Okay.
the cost to the taxpayers is even higher.
Okay, very good. That's where the difference lies. Okay, thank you very much.
Would it be helpful to pull up that spreadsheet that you were talking about?
Should be able to share.
I'm happy to do. I don't know if you were talking to me, Catherine, or someone else in the room. I'm happy to do
Yes,
that
Scott.
if the committee feels that would be a benefit to these discussions.
Yeah, it's clear to me that it's, there's statutory language that speaks about, my question was just, would it alter the cost? And it sounds like what it's not gonna do is bring the costs down, because we won't be able to show, at least based on the numbers we have now, the information we have now, we wouldn't be able to show that it was less expensive than a new build. So the cost we had is the cost we have unless we get a space waiver.
Well,
That's still-
the space waiver, but you still wouldn't, again, on the alterations extensions, those numbers, for option 2, without the waiver, 42 million, with the waiver, 35, or the 50 million with the auditorium and the 42, those anticipate that you would only get, and I think this was a very conservative, I assumed the state would pick up 40% of all of the renovation costs, meaning they wouldn't, do 60%. So 40% of the bones of the building and everything else they would pay for. And honestly, I think that was a fairly conservative. I would think that there might be more costs ineligible for construction.
So while that's certainly concerning to me, the number, if that were the choice we maybe take to the taxpayer in referendum, would be the total budgeted cost. So we don't take just a portion or the share.
Right.
So this won't change. It's the breakdown of the state fund and the town cost would change, is what I'm hearing.
Right.
Right, in the town, even though there is state funding, the way the referendum is written and the way the state requires it, is the town has to approve the total amount. So let's just say, I'm gonna start at the top of the page. Let's just say that option 1, new school without an auditorium, was what this committee decided to bring to the community. The community voted for that. The community then would vote in either town meeting, referendum, whatever the process is, would vote to approve 60,634,253. Then the grant would go in, and the state then would, they would agree to paying, that percentage either with or without the space waiver. And again, you can see that with a space waiver, getting up to the 53.21%, it's a significant increase in state reimbursement, bringing the cost to the taxpayers down to 28 million. And again, that's before the year-to-year savings that Phil presented as far as operational costs. So again, if you're looking over a 20-year period, $500,000 a year, which are going to escalate year over year, it kind of brings that over a 20-year bond down to about an $18 million cost.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions before we move on? Go ahead, Peter.
Scott, I had asked at the last meeting prior to the public engagement session that we have an understanding of what the extension and renovation, if I'm saying that right, it's like alteration and extension option would be if we had Hall School unoccupied in terms of construction cost and schedule. We had
Yeah, I thought I had provided that, Peter, and I apologize if I did not send that
Perhaps I
out.
missed it in these email struggles, but I was hoping to understand that better.
Yeah, could you just give us a summary, Scott, of what the?
Well,
what'd you
in
find?
essence, it's the same cost. It would cut about a year out. So it would be about it would be about 5.5% to 6% of escalation less. And I thought actually I had provided that at the last meeting. If you give me a moment, I can, if you've got other things to discuss, I can look that up for you.
Thank you. Thank you. That and one other question while you're searching through your notes. In terms of occupation in the alteration and extension option, could the new space be occupied earlier than we're showing now while the new auditorium is being constructed, if that's approved by taxpayers? Because we're showing, I think, that being completed, if I understand it correctly, Scott, and then occupation. Why would the auditorium impact us occupying the new space unless it's something I'm not understanding?
It doesn't necessarily. That is probably a better question for Phil. We did discuss that. Theoretically, you could occupy the building in fall of 2027 with the understanding that there would still be active construction going on the site to create the auditorium for, in essence, the next year.
It might have been
I
close.
don't know, Phil, do you want to talk to this? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Proximity of the
Auditorium to wherever the classroom space is.
That's my guess, but.
Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once here. Does that, I was trying to look at that on the timeline, Scott, does it show that we are not occupying the building until the auditorium is done in 2 and 2A?
No.
No,
I'd like to jump in on this. If you look carefully at building option 2 or 2A, FF&E new construction would be complete the summer of 2026. So there's no reason why fall of 2026 that whatever we have could be utilized for the students. I don't think that we would be able to move pre-K to 4 into the building at that point in time, but we would at least be able to move the current students in hall. We never would have a problem moving them in. What am I talking about?
no, that's exactly how it was presented, Ralph, is you create the new space, you move this, including new FF&E, you move where appropriate. You move the students, we're not going to buy FF&E for pre-K in first grade and put, middle school students
Right,
in.
you'd be able to move the students, the existing students, into the new wing
Yes,
while you go back and work on the existing.
that's the way the schedule was created, and that's, I believe is how.
Okay. So FF&E for those alterations to the existing building would allow us to open that portion in the fall of 2027.
Well, again, Phil, if you can bring up the schedule again.
We just wouldn't have an auditorium at that time.
Yes, that is correct. You could.
Okay.
Again, as I stated, you could have the full pre-K through 8 on the Hall Memorial campus with the understanding that there would still be construction, active construction on the campus, creating the auditorium. You're going to be demolishing the existing academic wing and building the auditorium. Can it be done? Absolutely. Will additional safety measures and things need to be put in place? Absolutely.
Will it be destructive? Absolutely.
You got to break some eggs. And I do have, and I can send this formally to everyone after. I thought I did. I actually updated the matrix of costs with unoccupied, both for option 2, option 2A, with and without a space waiver, and I can share that on the screen.
You should be able to share stuff.
Okay, let me, there we go, share. Nope, I'm disabled at the moment.
All right, try again.
Here we go. This one. Share. Okay, hopefully, can everyone see that?
Yes.
What's on the screen?
Could you zoom maybe a little bit so that we can see it a little larger?
Let me see here. A little larger. It's fairly large on my screen, so I don't know what.
If you guys don't mind.
No,
Yeah.
I can stand.
Okay, yeah, we really want to.
That's better. Perfect, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just scroll a little bit. There you go, Scott.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to options. So again, as a point of reference, option 2A, this is occupied. So again, if it's unoccupied, again, I preface this with unoccupied. Option 2 below does not include cost of temporary facilities, and those costs would not qualify for reimbursement. So these costs are vacated building. In essence, you're able to pick up a year, we're anticipating, and you're saving, that 5 to 5.5% of escalation on the construction costs. So it's dropping you from 42 to 40 or 50 to 47.8 with a waiver, 42 or 35 to 34.1, 42.1 to 42.27. So I've done some research. We're currently bidding out a small portable addition, a couple of classrooms with a corridor connection. The installation cost, including the utilities and all, and again, this is just for a classroom, is about $200,000 a classroom, and then about $30,000 a year to lease those classrooms. Let's just say, every 10 classrooms is $2 million. You've got probably close to 25 classrooms. So you're talking about, 4 or 5 million. That's without gymnasium, cafeteria, kitchen, administrative areas, other support areas. There's really no way, unless you can find another available facility that could meet the academic needs of the middle school. It's really not cost effective to try and vacate the building. And I'll send a PDF of this, Catherine, to you after. I thought I had sent it, and I apologize if I did not.
And if memory serves, our friends in Tallinn spent about $10 million on their portable building. Their portable city, I like to refer to it as.
They didn't pay for it.
Well, we would have to pay for it.
No, I know.
It didn't mean it didn't cost
They
$10
were
million.
very, their
Right.
first school was all.
Right, but the cost of just portables, because we'll talk about this later, but I don't know that we have.
You also have to have someone design it. Because in essence, you're kind of designing a temporary school. So you'd have to hire an architect and people to design it, coordinating all the utilities and so forth. I just don't feel it would be, unless there's a neighboring building that could be very easily modified to accommodate the school program. I don't think vacating the building is an option that makes any fiscal sense.
Well, we will talk about that in more depth in just about a few minutes here. If we want to move on to the next item, concept plan, fit study and request for proposals. I know you mentioned that a few minutes ago, Scott, that you did put out an RFP.
Did we have a chance to ask questions about
Well,
that?
no, I have not issued an RFP. That would be inappropriate. I did send a draft RFP to your and Phil's attention, Catherine, to distribute to the committee, so the committee could review the scope. Just a high level, what I did request was concept plans for both options. It describes the options that are on the table. I have requested that it include topographic and a site plan, both concept and presentation site plan, utilizing existing town GIS mapping with all of the play fields, parking requirements, parent drop-off, bus drop-off, and so forth, included in both plans. I asked the architects to do an initial design prior to starting the project, have at least one meeting with Phil, just to understand academically the requirements of the exercise. Submit those plans to the committee for approval and review. Take any committee comments, have them go back, modify those, and then make final presentation drawings that could be presented to the community. That would just be floor plans and a site plan, no building elevations.
Did we do A1? We didn't really,
Yeah.
did we?
Yeah, we did.
I don't, oh.
Yeah, because remember, Ralph was talking about the questions and answers from the public presentation.
So I thought we talked about that up here. I didn't think we talked about, I mean, kind of our feedback on the presentation. Did I miss that in our just discussion?
Kind of rolled into all of that. Eric is just questioning if there were, was there discussion about the public presentation from our committee? And if there was anything you guys wanted to discuss, we're kind of going back one, but for anybody that was in that presentation on the 9th, was there any questions or anything you wanted to discuss? Ralph?
No, I'm sorry, I was on the next item.
All right.
I apologize if we discussed it and at nauseam. I thought we were still on Scott's owner's project update.
We are.
Right, so well, Catherine moved to item A2, 7A2.
Which
the
is part of
concept
his
plan.
update, really.
I just-
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. I think when we started talking about the temporary facilities, I sort of felt it had moved forward, but certainly you can go back, and I'm willing to entertain any questions that I can answer as far as the presentation.
Well, I'll just comment, I think the presentation was a fantastic presentation. I thought Phil did a great job capturing where we're at and how we got there. I always want to see more people in the room. I've said multiple times to anyone who asks me about this process that seeing the financials, which we've just gotten a look at here in the last few weeks, and hearing from the public will help me with my vote as we move forward in this process. And the one thing that became clear to me from that public presentation is we need to hear from a whole lot more folks, a lot more stakeholders. Between online and in the room, there were just over 50 people in attendance at most at any given time. And while they were all engaged, and I think that's fantastic, we need to, and we'll talk about how we do that later, make sure we reach many more people and address as many of the comments as we can. Some of them will be out of our scope of work and they will be academic in nature. But as far as the actual building and the process, answer as many of those as we can and kind of move forward with that. I gave my feedback a little bit on some of the technical issues in the room. And the biggest was that we expected to have a packed room and it would help with some of the acoustics in the gym. I know Peter said he had a hard time hearing in there. We imagined more people in the room. And so that would, make a change. I hesitate to say we should change where we hold the presentation because we never know when we're gonna get that many folks, and I don't ever want to shut people out of attending a meeting. That would be terrible to me.
Any other comments? Thank you, Erica. Peter, go ahead.
I want to echo what was done previously. I thought that Scott and Phil did an outstanding job, particularly Phil coordinating all of the mechanics of functioning in that space. I thought he did yeoman work there. But it's a challenging space. To me, the people sitting in the bleachers, could they really see what was being projected behind us on the stage on that big screen? I'm somewhat doubtful, although I was not sitting in the bleachers.
Yeah.
And the acoustics were, I know I'm a senior citizen in this group, but the acoustics were very challenging. as far as hearing what was being said by the audience or board members. And I'm wondering if, I understand what Eric is saying, that we have to be prepared for the kind of attendance that we had when we had the town meeting forming the committee. I was expecting that kind of, especially after what happened with the distribution center attendances. I guess we were not in that league. And I'm wondering if that big room downstairs in the library where I've attended some meetings wouldn't be a reasonable compromise, splitting the difference between, say, being here in this kind of less than desirable space, and the gym. Could we be in that big library downstairs room? And what is the seating capacity there? Do we know?
I don't know
Yeah.
offhand, it's
Pretty
probably
big.
just over 100.
I mentioned
Is
that
my guess,
before.
but I think that's a great opportunity, especially if we continue to do hybrid meetings, right? So gives people who want to attend virtually can still see and have a different space. We know we have challenge with large meeting space in this town and appropriate everything, right? Whether it's acoustics or visual, we don't have a large space that's set up with all of that. So we do the best we can. I can tell you from a few folks in the room that spoke to me, they could see and they could hear. I also heard from someone who said they couldn't hear any of the questions because the people were talking forward, even though there were microphones. I could hear everything they could say, but the people behind, it was a little bit difficult. So I think it's always challenging, which is why we want to do our best to capture the discussion that happens.
And just closing, if I may, with my time. I made a decision prior to the meeting to make sure that I wasn't engaging the public as a board, as a school building committee member. So I felt it was important for Phil, Scott to make their presentations. But I noticed that a number of our members did comment, share their opinions and so forth. So I guess I'm asking if that's the case, is that going to be our format for the future, that is the SBC membership also going to comment on what's being presented? And is that how we want to proceed? I'm just asking that, throwing that out there, I suppose. I'm assuming that's the case, because that's what happens.
Right. And Peter, that's a really good point, because I don't know that any of us really expected to be answering questions. As Scott and Phil were really the presenters, when the questions got fielded, I think it was, okay, the members on the board felt they could answer it, so it just kind of happened that way. I don't think we planned it that way, but it is a great question. Do we want to continue with that format where if somebody on the committee can answer the question, have them answer it, or do we want to have a point person like Phil or Scott to field those questions?
So in the case of this last presentation, I think both Phil, Catherine, and you, look to folks that you thought could appropriately answer the question, and they were responded to by members based on that direction. And so, I would say, if we have clear answers and can answer them in the room, I think that's the appropriate time to answer the question, right? Or if it's as simple as saying we don't have an answer to that, but if you think that, Anne has an answer from the Board of Ed perspective, or, a technical question can be answered by someone on the land use subcommittee or the finance subcommittee, or some questions that came from work the selectmen had done. I think it's appropriate, if that's the direction that we're going to go in, that they were directed by Phil, who couldn't answer them, and then Catherine giving those other members the floor. So again, we know we can't answer every question, but I think not just hearing the questions and saying, thanks for stopping by, we'll get back to you, that some interaction is important. If it's a question and answer, someone has to be able to answer it. And if our committee can do that, my take is that under the direction of our chair, that the committee be able to answer those.
Did you feel like you wanted to answer something and then maybe?
Well, at times the answers were subjective, to be
Yeah.
truthful.
Okay.
And I think it's worth recognizing that this is a committee that's dominated by members of the education group, whether it's school employees, teachers, principals, Board of Ed members. And sometimes I think it's good to have the perspective of just an at-large member of the committee like Catherine, or dare I say it myself. And I didn't feel that was appropriate for myself at that meeting. I wanted Scott and I wanted Phil to present all the facts.
Right.
Now, I grant you, it was at times strange, that in-depth discussion of the bus access. I was totally baffled by that. I didn't know how anyone could answer some of those questions.
Right. And I don't think we really gave him an answer other than it'll be looked at.
Yes, yes.
What are you,
So I'm
sorry,
getting a sense that commentary is welcome from members of the SBC as well as our spokespeople.
Yeah.
That's what I'm taking from it.
yeah, and if I'd just like to echo Erica and Peter's comments on the excellent job Phil did and working with Scott and Phil preparing the presentation, because clearly there was a lot of information in that presentation. And if I hadn't known some of the background of the project and everything that we had gone through, I would have been overwhelmed as a resident seeing all of that information all in one night. So certainly I think we'll have to have multiple sessions like that and continue with the question and answer format, and try to get some more feedback from people, because it was definitely a small percentage that were in attendance that night. But, you know, word gets around, and I think people will start getting a little more interested in what the details of this project, you know, what our committee is doing. So I do want to thank them for all the effort that was put into that presentation. I believe it is available online on our website and on the town website. So if you haven't had a chance, there's definitely an opportunity to do it at your leisure.
Ooh, so that the updated sheet Scott just showed, that's online with everything else all in one place?
Not that updated
Not that
sheet.
updated
He
sheet.
did that after, I think, the presentation, right, Scott? That's,
And
yeah.
I did just forward that to you, Catherine. I made a PDF. So Catherine and Phil, you have that in your possession. So you can distribute that to the committee.
Great, thanks.
Okay,
Can you send that out?
all right, yep. Were there any other questions about the presentation? Ralph, your hand is still up, and Brianna has her hand up too. Ralph,
Brianna.
did you have?
No, I was just left it up because I do want to cover some comments on the next item.
Okay.
So Brianna, take it over.
Thanks for that lovely introduction. Firstly, maybe what we could really use in our town is an auditorium with seating people and really great acoustics and microphones and whatnot. Number one. Number two, I think, yes, having Phil, Scott, and Catherine run those presentations is perfect. And if they feel that someone else from the committee could chime in or offer some expertise, that would be a great time to ask them if they would like to participate or throw it their way. That seems to make sense to me. I mean, we all have strengths that are helping here along the way, so why not use them in that fashion? And then I sit on this committee technically as a member at large. It happens, I have educational experience, but I represent the people who came to that presentation. And I encourage our community members to get on out there and help. And I feel like any comment they have or a question or concern that they have is valuable and important, and I want them to feel heard. And if we can answer the questions, we should to the best of our ability. And if we don't know the answer, then we can find out and get back to them. And even sometimes when it's hard to hear, because people do become impassioned sometimes, just looking for what the root of it is. And just knowing that, I mean, those people care. This is important to them. They wouldn't be coming out if it wasn't. So I just hope that our community feels that way, that they can come and express their concerns or their ideas, and that they will be heard. And we're going to do our best to give them the information that they need.
Thank you, Brianna. there anybody else that want to share your comments about the presentation?
Just one observation on the attendance. I think we had probably less than 1% of the taxpayer population in Willington there. So hopefully we can engage a lot more than just 1%.
Yeah, I wonder if it was because it was the night after the election, were people tired from that? It was that they were waiting to see the presentation and then jump in, but you know, it just, all it says to me is we got a lot of work to do to reach a lot of folks.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ralph.
Can we at least explore using the library instead for the next engagement?
I like that
To
idea.
determine the size of the space in there, how many chairs we can set up in that large room downstairs?
Well, let's, we're actually gonna be talking about that
Oh.
under the outreach. We're gonna come
Oh,
up
I'm
with
sorry.
some dates.
All right,
But
I defer.
I think that is a good option. I know it was brought up before and someone had said it's kind of small, so I'd be curious to see
I think because we
how many
all,
people we could fit in that
it's
room.
a little over 100, I believe, but I think we all thought we'd have a massive crowd.
I thought
Yeah,
I
that
think,
too.
I don't think there was probably one of us at the table that wasn't stunned that there were, you know, 22 people in the room, not counting ourselves.
After the election.
And, you know, 34 people at most online, so. We
No.
plan for big and we can kind of scale down and let people know, oh, I'll talk about it in a minute.
Yeah, so, I'd be remiss if I didn't offer Phil what he thought of the presentation. I know you're under the weather, Phil, but if you'd like to share a sentence or two about what your thoughts were about the presentation.
I think everyone has nailed it. I think we expected a larger crowd. And sometimes I don't know why in Willington, if people, you know, it's not, I don't know if people only show up when it's something controversial. Maybe they needed to see the numbers first and the presentation first, the materials, and then it becomes controversial. I'm not sure. But I think that's one of many that need to happen. That's the bottom line. And the format might look different each time, depending on who that public is and who's going to have the answers. You know, if it's a land question, I think the land subcommittee is a good person to answer that. If it's finance based and it came through the finance subcommittee, they can answer those questions. I'm okay with that. If it's process based, it might be Scott Pellman. But I thought it went well. I will tell you, the last time I looked at the YouTube video, there were over 150 views. I will check it again while we're on the meeting. So people did watch it or are watching it. We'll see where it goes.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that. Did you happen to notice if the question and answer portion of that meeting was recorded?
It was, and you can hear them, but you didn't hear any side conversations if they did not have a microphone. And that's why I started running around passing the microphone, because you have to talk into the microphone and you have to be patient to have a microphone in your hand to have good volume. Otherwise, you wouldn't hear it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, Erica, I'm gonna let you, do you have any other comments before I move on?
I don't, thank you. I just thought, did I just fall asleep here? We didn't talk about it.
It kind of got mumbled
That's okay,
with a
yeah.
few of these items
So
here.
a lot of
so-
them overlap, so.
Yeah,
thank you.
so we'll get on track here. So under the owner's project manager concept plan, fit study and request for proposals. Scott did actually already update us on the fact that he put together an RFQ for the architectural engineering piece of doing a enhanced concept study on both options. That was emailed to the entire committee. I don't believe we're ready to, it's not finalized yet, it's a draft. So I think, I don't know if the committee has had a chance to look at what was sent, but it is on the agenda. If anybody does have any questions about it, now's the time to bring up your questions or concerns. I'm gonna start because I had one concern about the original request to hire an architect to further develop these concept plans. And that concern was mainly on the site. The original request, I think, was on the building and the spaces. And the site was something that I wanted to see as well. And I believe, Scott, you put that in your RFQ. So they are gonna look at the site, they're gonna look at the entrance and exits of the school, where the playgrounds are, where the fields are. And so that's my only comment on that, but everything else on there looked pretty detailed. Were there any other comments from the committee on the RFQ that was sent? Ralph? Your
Yes.
hands-
No, I took it down, I put it back up again. All right. Let's see. And I'll speak to Scott primarily on this. Option 2, page 2, bottom paragraph. I think the route is 32, not 23.
Right, Mike had the same comment.
The
Oh.
other thing I'm concerned about is the statement that says the existing 1922 building must remain and be incorporated into the final design. That's not quite true, because we have the gym, which is not part of the 1922 building, that we would preserve, and the two classroom areas either side of the gym would be retained.
Well,
And I think that needs to be made clear to whoever is responding to this.
Well, if the architect came up with a solution that created a new gymnasium and allowed the phasing, I did not want to strap them with any parameters outside of maintaining the existing building. Now, I'm certainly happy to put in that language if the committee wants to state that those areas of the building also need to be maintained. But I did not want to curb their thought process and approach outside of saying that the original historic building needed to remain.
I
Hey,
agree
can
with
we-
that.
Can we include that as a optional consideration?
Between
And
I'm
what
asking them to,
designers are redesigning ourselves. I mean, I thought what we were all clear on was that the 1922 piece was what we felt needed to stay. If they could show me a better concept
Yeah,
of moving it around that meant moving the gym without throwing the cost.
Well, I, at the risk of plucking out a turn here, I have to respond. I think the inherent logic of retaining an entire gymnasium makes me think it's awful hard to believe that there would be a more creative, cost-effective solution that would tell us to demolish that existing gym. I'm not ruling it out, but logic dictates that keeping an entire gymnasium might net us an auditorium. They seem similar in size and structure to me. I'm not an architect, I'm just a plain old elevator guy, but that seems strange to me. Am I off base, Scott?
well, I mean, I'm an architect, and that's why I proposed the phasing plan. You know, I've designed schools for, over 30 years. But again, I didn't want, I'm happy to put that statement in if that's the direction of the building committee. I just, again, I didn't want to limit the options that, the designer may come up with.
Anne?
I would rather keep it broad so we don't limit the possibilities. So that I would like to see a new gym. I think in the new building, we would have a brand new gym, and I would like to see a new gym in the renovated plan also. So I'd like to keep it open so we have as much possibilities as possible for new spaces and 21st century spaces.
Yeah, I think you'd have to realize, Anne, that you may not see a new gym in another architect's concept. You may not. I mean, now if you wanted to dictate that they had to provide a new gym, but again, I think looking at the site, I think that would be incredibly challenging, but you could also make that a requirement if this committee felt that a new gym had to be part of the project.
Again, we're not designing the building or the space. This is really enhanced concept to make sure that what was outlined in our educational specification is going to fit in that footprint. Right? Erica?
Yeah, so I agree with that. I have a comment on option 1 that involves the construction of the new elementary school. In that paragraph, the site is not located at 17 Adamek Road.
The town
Because
property card lists it as 17 Adamick Road. So I got that information along with the parcel ID off the town tag.
I think the parcel ID alone would be adequate.
I think
Well,
so,
as
yeah.
well as 17 Adamick.
The 17 Attic is a completely different side of the road. It's in no way, that particular parcel is in no way connected to the land parcel that we're looking at. And so I think if you just use the parcel ID located at Adamick Road,
Lot 9, yeah,
right.
I would follow.
simply
yeah.
because if you're looking at Adamick Road, the parcel we're looking at is on this side of the road, in
Right.
Glass Factory. 17 is completely disconnected. It's 2 parcels away. So I
Yes.
understand why we might have it there. I just think it's a bit confusing. This
Yeah.
is the home of the owner.
Right.
That is not connected to our
Right.
parcel of land.
Okay, you're
So
right.
maybe, yeah, so maybe
It was the
follow,
property, I gotcha.
so maybe follow the language that was in the letter of intent, Scott, for that paragraph.
Mhm.
Were there any other comments on the RFP, RFQ?
Yeah, my last comment was that what
Oh,
you said,
sorry.
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
it's a concept design.
Right, it's a
that,
concept.
If we have a final approved project or referendum, we're going to have an architect who's going to bring us a final design. So remembering that this was a higher level concept design, and I think we leave them with as large a scope as possible and not narrow it down to you must keep this and this and this and this. But
Right.
we're asking them for their concept. We already know we have Scott, who is an architect, and can do some of this work, so.
And we want them to think outside the box with this, you know, I mean, we know what the box is. You know, but we want them to come to the table with an outside the box approach so that we can consider that. Any other comments on the RFP, RFQ? Brianna, sorry.
That's okay.
Did
I'll
you-
wait my turn. Go ahead.
I
Brianna.
just have a question about words because I would like to sound educated when I speak about this topic. So on page 2, it says alteration and extension, which is what I thought we were using AE. Then we have renovation and alteration, and then we have alteration / addition. Are those 3 different things that I need to get straight in my head?
No, it's really all.
Really, they're all the same, but I think the state distinguishes it one way or the other.
State does alteration extension. That's what I thought.
Mhm.
Scott
That's
said, right,
correct.
okay.
Yes.
So I don't know if maybe I'm the only one in the whole entire thing who keeps is wondering if these are the same thing. Maybe I'm not. But for ease of understanding for our public specifically, and I guess me going forward, it would be good if we just stick with one term for those things. I would think that might be helpful.
Yep, I can fix those so that they're all the same.
Is the alteration extension the one that's going to be on the state paperwork? Is that right?
If you chose that option, yes, it would go in as an AE project on the grant application, alteration extension.
Okay. Now I can sound wicked smart. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. All right, Peter, you're next.
Just wanted to understand the mechanics of this. Scott, your firm Colliers will also be submitting a. No.
Yeah, I'll have to see. Again, the scope has expanded. I want it to be, an apples to apples, I do think, so I will send it to our firm. But I'll tell you that the cost is going to go up.
So is your firm, they're a separate division of Colliers, right?
Correct.
And do we need a motion to move this forward, or should the RFP just happen?
Yeah, we just got it today. If everybody's comfortable with moving forward with some of the revisions and comments that were made tonight, I'm sure we can give Scott direction to finalize it, send it off to
Oh, so
us.
this is not ready.
I don't know that it's a draft. Is
Okay.
what he's sharing.
It's very close. I did, and when I present my updated timeline, you'll see that I left them highlighted in yellow and open on this document, but I did take a look at a timeline to get this out, get responses back, give them enough time. And then you need to be able to review the concepts, present those concepts to the public, but you'll see in the timeline, you have to make a selection on or around February 1st, if you're going to have a March 1st referendum or public meeting. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the schedule. So I had, with the committee's approval, would like to get this on the street this Friday, and it should be publicly advertised. I'm more than happy. I will send it around to a number of architects that I think would do a good job with it, as a courtesy, but it also does need to be publicly advertised.
We're missing Mike tonight. We're missing Gary. That's from what I can see here. I would push them for any feedback on this, Catherine, before we give it a nod.
I did get feedback from Mike already.
Okay.
I don't think I heard somebody say in page 2, item B, we refer in paragraph 1 to a 1920 building, and in paragraph 3, option 2, a 1922 building. So just cleaning up that.
That is 22, correct.
In build, right, it's the same building, so we just want to put the same year on it.
Yeah, that minor detail.
So Mike did actually comment, he supports the RFP, and the only note was already brought up, which is the route number. And we do have a quorum tonight, so I wouldn't be objected to make a motion to approve the RFP after the edits that are made, and take a vote on it tonight if the rest of the committee feels the same. Anne?
I move that we accept this RFP with the suggested changes that we've made this evening.
I'll second.
And discussion we just had, but I'll open it up again, discussion. Anne?
I would just like to see us be able to stay on our timeline. I think, Scott has kind of set up a timeline, and if we approve it tonight, we can stay within that guideline, the guidelines of that timeline.
I would echo that same comment, Anne, thank you. Any other discussion? Justin?
I know most of them are minor changes, but do we need to have a review of it afterwards if we do accept this? I wouldn't say it would be like everybody, but two of the comments that were made there should it just be reviewed quickly before it goes out, that's all.
Well, as the chair, I can review those edits before it goes out. So if everybody's in agreement with the minor edits that were brought up tonight, Scott can send me his final draft, or his final version, I should say, before it goes out. And on behalf of the committee, I'd be happy to review and approve that. Erica?
Justin's comments were exactly what I was going to say. If just between you or Phil, someone take a look at it to make sure those adjustments are made.
And Catherine, if you could send me, either this evening or first thing in the morning, the purchasing agent or whoever would receive these proposals. I've requested that I get a copy electronically, so I'll be able to pull them together and distribute them to yourself and the committee. But someone at the town, I just need the name and address of who they should be delivered to.
We set it up the same way we did the RFP for OPM.
Right, that's what I would do. Board of Selectmen, it's the Board of Selectmen's office. But I can send you that. It's
Okay.
essentially, it's the same address that you guys sent your RFP, your
We used on the last
proposal
one.
to.
Okay.
Sorry to
I'll see if
chime in.
I can dig that out.
Does that have to go through the, Scott, would you post that? You know where you post all the school building stuff?
No, because this is pre-referendum, so it doesn't have to be on the DAS website.
Okay,
I would just say you need to follow town procurement requirements. So I'm assuming it would need to be advertised in your local paper, whatever your town procurement requirements are. And again, as soon as I have confirmation that the town's posted it, I will, on behalf of the committee and the town, send it off to a number of architects
okay,
that do this type of work.
thank you.
And Scott, can you just review the timeline that you said we were gonna, if you send it out this Friday, I think you started to say this Friday, and
I
then how
think
much?
that's that's under new business. I think that's, well, you're saying community outreach schedule timeline. I took that as item 8B. I'd be happy to go over my updated milestone schedule now.
Actually, let me rephrase my question. So regarding the RFQ, you mentioned you wanted to send it out this Friday.
Correct. So
how much time will they have to respond, and when would we be receiving their cost proposals?
you would receive them on December 5th. In advance of the December 7th building committee meeting. I would say at that meeting on December 7th, you would make a selection. The next day, we would notify the architect of that award and get them a purchase order. You would receive initial concept plans by January 3rd. So again, very tight timeline. Review those at the January 4th building committee meeting. Receive updated final concept plans from the architect based on your comments and feedbacks on January 13th in advance of the January 18th building committee meeting. Review the final concept plans at that meeting on the 18th. I would anticipate, if we're going to stick to Wednesdays, following up public meeting where those plans are presented on the 25th. And again, an option needs to be selected for referendum by February 1st. And a lot of that is dependent upon what the process is, Erica. If you can let us know, or through the town attorney. I don't know what, some towns have different notification periods in order to establish a referendum or a town meeting. We would also, once the option is selected, need to look at zoning for an 824 referral. So all of that needs to happen from the time period where you select an option to the town meeting, town referendum. And the real key is, with a successful referendum, or until we have an option chosen, we can't even start drafting the formal RFQs and RFPs for architect, construction manager selection, and OPM selection, because you're going to want to have those in the works. In the timeline that I put together that I sent to Catherine, looks at all that to try and get the architect on board as quickly as possible. But we don't know until an option's been selected. We don't know what the what that option is, that price tag would be, and we need to tailor those RFQs, RFPs to that specific data. Now, if the referendum town meeting didn't pass and you already had those RFQs out there, you could just cancel it or not issue an RFP. But we need to get those on, because you really need to have your architect on board in order to meet the schedules that have been presented. I've got architect selection by May 18th.
Okay, thank you. Ralph?
Okay, two things. And number one, I'd like to see a copy of the final RFP, RFQ that we've been discussing tonight before the same time you get it, Catherine. So if you would distribute that, that would be great. I may have some architects that I might send it out to as well. Secondly, with respect to December 5th to December 7th to review everything we get from these potential designers, that's not a heck of a lot of time.
No, and I also don't anticipate that you would do interviews. I figured, again, with this very tight scope, very defined scope of concept planning, that you would, and again, the way it's written is you're going to make a quality-based selection based on firm experience, profile, and cost. But it would be not solely on low bid. So you have the flexibility, but right now this does not anticipate, if you were going to anticipate interviews, you'd have to notify the 3 or 4 shortlisted firms, give them a week or 2 to prepare, interview, then make a selection. And at that point, there's not going to be any time to be able to get your architects on board to meet the schedules. for a fall 26 or fall 27 opening.
Ralph, you mentioned, I can certainly send you a copy of the RFQ that once Scott edits it. But regarding the sending the RFP out, that really should come from Scott Pellman and Colliers. So I would say if you do have a couple architects that you want him to send it out to, send me those names and I will get that over to Scott.
We're not going to publicly advertise this at all.
No, it is gonna be.
It'll go on our
publicly
website,
advertised.
but I don't think every member of the public should be direct soliciting. I don't think that would be appropriate. We do a direct solicitation of bids through the town. And this is the process.
It's gonna be publicly advertised, Ralph.
We have
Okay,
to.
so if I were to give a heads up to a few architectural firms to examine what's on the town website, then I'm not steering it towards any one particular firm. I'm just suggesting they look at it.
Right.
don't
that's
see-
your-
I don't see any conflict there at all.
Ann?
Would this change the pricing that we have in front of us?
No.
What do you?
No,
what do you-
okay, so we're still working with the same pricing that we've been talking about.
Yeah,
And
we're-
what,
we're-
Pricing for
footage
what,
based on recent bids and then escalations.
can we just clarify what Ann is referring to? Because I interpreted that as something else. And what are you referring to? Pricing for what?
Okay, I'm wondering if these conceptual drawings will represent the same pricing that we're working with right now. So the
Pricing of
price is,
what?
the
The
price is,
total construction of the project?
yes, or would that change?
Go ahead, Erica.
Yeah, I have a question. So that's a great question by Ann. We are, in my mind, we are very late to the game to be doing this. If I hear Scott's timeline, the RFP says, you know, the design team shall complete the work on or before January 27th, and he's saying beginning of February, we need to make a decision as committee. We're spending money to look at something for, 5 minutes. Just for what? It's not gonna be part of the bulk of those public presentations. And we don't know what this is going to cost
That's
us.
really troubling,
It's really troubling that it's not gonna be part of the conversation.
that we can't show this to the townspeople that are in the.
That's because
No.
it's November 16th and we're just moving in this direction. I think this is something we should have done a long time ago, and it was something we didn't move in that direction. So to go in it now, I'm not sure this is the best use of our dollars at this point. I'll be curious to see what the bids come back in at. But the amount of money we may be spending for it just to be us to be looking at in the meeting as a board.
Well,
I'm not sure that's the best use of our funds.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, based on what I just heard from what Scott was sharing with us on the dates, the final concept we're gonna have in our hands by January 13th. Public meeting, January 25th. So yes, we're gonna absolutely be able to share these conceptual enhanced drawings with the public before we go to town referendum. I think what's happening is the timing of it is very critical right now. That the dates that he presents, we have to follow those in order for this all to sync up.
I guess
That's what I just heard, right, Scott?
and so for me, I had to fully understand why at this game, this is the most critical piece. Scott, are we really late in the game to be taking on this particular aspect of a project?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that statement. Certainly, having a little bit more time maybe to get a little bit more use out of the plans. But again, it's all laid out. And again, Catherine, I don't know if you've taken the liberty to send the updated milestone schedule that I provided to you earlier this afternoon to the committee, but it may benefit for them just to be able to look at it.
Why don't you share it? Why don't you share it on the screen? I don't know that I received it, but if you could share it on the screen, that'd be great.
Yeah, I sent it to you, and then I sent it to you again just prior to the meeting. So, here we are at tonight's meeting, November 16th. We're going to review the phase 2 investigation proposal as well. This one is a TBD because I know the town is working.
Not seeing anything, Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hit the share button. Apologize. So hopefully, can you see it now? Yes?
Yeah.
Excellent. So here we are, November 16th, it's tonight's meeting.
I did receive that. I thought you were talking about a revised schedule timeline.
No, no, it was this document. So again, this one is TBD because I know the town is currently working on some of those costs to the taxpayers. Again, hopefully looking to issue the purchase order if you so choose, or once we get to the phase 2 work, we'd like to get that issued as soon as possible. The phase 2 environmental additional work, try and get that out by Friday, as well as issuing the architect concept planning by this Friday, the 18th. Again, received the architect's concept planning RFP proposals. So that gives us just gives them about 2.5 weeks to give it some thought, put together their response package. Actually, just over 2 weeks. 5th is a Monday. So again, pretty tight timeline. I've put in some placeholders for public meetings here. Sometime, one in early December. Building committee meeting again on the 7th. We get the architect's plans. I can try and bump this back an extra day or two, but I think we need to really legitimately give them a couple of weeks at least just to put a package together. Potentially select on the 7th. Again, another potential placeholder for a meeting here in between the building committee meetings. Building committee meeting December 21st, January 3rd. So they're going to have to make a commitment to working through the holidays. January 3rd, receive those initial concept plans prior to the building committee meeting on the 4th. Building committee gets a chance to review those, provide comments to the architect. Architect would make those revisions, get those off to the committee for the 13th in advance of the meeting on the 18th. Review the final concept plans from the architect on the 18th, have a public meeting following Wednesday on the 25th. And then February 1st, we need to make the committee needs to make a recommendation. And again, this is where we need to confirm what the timeline is for scheduling a referendum town meeting, what the procedural requirements are. Again, once a selection is made, we can start coordinating the 053 application. Again, after that selection is made, one final meeting in preparation. Now, we may not be able to have a public meeting if there's a blackout period once the referendum is established or town meeting. 824 referral. At that point, building committee would need to start drafting an OPM RFP for owner's project management services. So that would happen by middle of February. In the meantime, I would start assisting in drafting your RFQ for both architect and CM. Get those to the building committee. March 2nd right now, again, placeholder for a referendum town meeting. If that passes, town issue RFP for OPM services the following day. Building committee meeting on the 15th. The 16th now, the building committees had the RFPs for approximately a month. Iron those out, issue an RFQ for the architect. Following day, issue RFQ for the construction managers. Town receives RFP for OPM services March 28th. I would still be on board coordinating PSCCD, Schedule 2 estimates, and submission of the grant application. Again, with the grant application, then my services would end. Building committee would then have OPM interviews in the beginning of April. Select an OPM, immediately start the project. Work with the committee now, receive the architect's RFQs for the architect. And the RFQs for the, actually one should say architect, one should say CM. And at that point, then your OPM would start drafting the RFPs for those services. Shortlist the architect and CMs in mid-April. Architect CM RFPs due early in May. Select an architect by May 18th and a CM by May 25th. In looking at sort of the global picture, how this works, again, we've tightened this up about as much as we can. You got a 12-month design period. You got your reviews and approvals, take it to the state bidding, and this is just for the new construction, if that is the one option you chose. The red line here, current status, we're in the end of November. So you can see that referendum local funding approval in March. You start your procurement of your services. You get your grant submission in. By that May 18th date, you're doing your contract execution with your architect. Kickoff June 1st, they're designing for 12 months. We have the review periods, bidding, 20-month construction period. You're done end of July, finish fitting out the building with FF&E beginning of August, and then close out, but your occupancy again would happen fall of 26. So you can see that there's really, at this point, there's no more float. There's no more extra time. This is a very aggressive schedule from here on out to try and get this approved. If the referendum disapproval doesn't happen, if this fails, then, certainly you're going to be pushing everything out at least a year.
Thank you, Scott. So we do have a motion to approve the draft RFP with the edits that we talked about tonight. We have a second. We've had discussion. Is there any other discussion before we take a vote?
Yes, but my question is more about, well, I guess it's related to this because I agree with Erica that it doesn't seem like there's enough time to consider what's being presented conceptually by whoever's awarded that work for either project. So what I'm asking is, where's the fire? Why do we have to work to this March referendum day? Why can't we have an April referendum and not have the committee and the townspeople absorb the concept plans so we have a better understanding of both concepts and pick a direction without all the pressure Scott seems to be suggesting is on us now? Why couldn't the referendum even be at the same time as the town referendum that we have on the budget and Region 19 and consolidate it and give us even more time? I don't think we need that much time, but it seems to me like we could move this referendum from March to April and allow enough time to understand the concept plans as a committee and then have public engagement sessions, not just, if I am understanding it correctly, Scott, we only have one public engagement on January 25th where they, well, here are all the concepts.
No, we haven't.
It's
Yeah.
several.
There's going to be seven. We haven't gotten to that yet, Peter, but I think that was just one that he mentioned.
I'm feeling this schedule is too hectic, too not enough time for us to absorb the information we're receiving, and certainly not for the townspeople.
So Scott, would you mind answering the question that Peter has about what is the push? Like, what would happen if we pushed out the referendum to April? Not that I'm suggesting that, I'm just trying to get an answer to Peter's question.
Yeah, in short, then again, till the referendum, what the project is, you can't go out for architect services. So it's going to push that start of design out. And again, a 12-month period to design an 83,000 square foot facility is very aggressive. This committee, and the town are going to have to make, decisions in a timely manner. And then with the construction period. So, I think any delay could push the project past a fall 26. I couldn't answer for Phil. I know there are some municipalities that don't like doing a mid-year move-in. If it was a renovation project, then you're just going on and renovating longer, but having those summer months is critical to be able to do some of the funding. So we'd have to take a look at the schedule. We'd have to take a look at then what schedule impacts were to escalations or overall project budgets. So again, I'm just reacting to try and achieve a goal of having the new option completed by the fall of 26, the renovation option completed by the fall of 27. If that is not the stated goal, we can certainly look at what those revisions would be. You can extend out the schedule with the understanding that that will have some effect on cost.
Thank you, Scott. I would like to stay with the target of what you've presented to us in the RFP. And maybe it is a tight, aggressive timeline for this, but we gotta at least try, get it out there. Let's get the information. And let's not forget, we already do have concept plans that Mr. Pellman have presented to us. So it's not like we have nothing. This additional step that we're going to is to get an enhanced concept plan for both options. Erica?
Yeah, so while I agree with Peter, I think we see it a little bit different. I think we're trying to put something into the timeline that doesn't fit the timeline. So I don't necessarily agree with pushing the timeline out. We've known since February of 22 about what our aggressive schedule is. And I have notes from that meeting that knew we were looking at before the end of March for a referendum. So we threw something in at the last minute to try to fit into the timeline we've set for ourselves. And then we knew was coming. So for me, I'm not sure this is going to help with the decision-making. And while I may or may not support this motion, that doesn't mean we have to accept an RFP. We can take a look at what those numbers are. And we don't know what's gonna come back and what that's gonna cost us to fit into this. So I'm not in favor of pushing out our timeline. But I also have real concerns about us throwing something that may have been valuable early on. And we moved in a different direction to adding it in now to delay the process. At this point, I've known since February, when Scott gave us these dates, what we were looking at for a timeline to meet a schedule. We knew it was aggressive then, and we're just adding on top of it. But I just want to make the committee aware, just because we approve this motion to put out an RFP does not mean we have to move forward with it. If the numbers come in and we don't feel like it's that the cost is going to net us the result that we're looking for, or change some of that, then we can reject and just not move forward with the item.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item before we take a vote? Anne?
I think it's pretty clear that we're going to need to make some kind of a decision by February 1st to go forward with the referendum. What I'm going to suggest might fit into our later when we talk about public engagement. But I think if at some point we could do some kind of a survey to help us to get a sense of what the community's feeling about the two options, I think that might help us to make the decision, which I believe based on this timeline will need to take place before February 1st.
And that's a great suggestion. Perhaps we can add that to the agenda of your communications subcommittee. That might be something you could work with Phil on I know we've sent out surveys in the past. Perhaps we start with that survey and just develop some additional questions that would help get a sense of where people are feeling at this point. Thank you.
Question, Catherine?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So we're voting on proceeding with this RFP.
Right, to get
But
solicited.
voting for or against the RFP does not commit us to the schedule in front of us if we elected to change it, is my question. Especially, I disagree, for example, with Erica that the concept plans are meaningless and ineffectual. I think they'd be very helpful to the committee and the townspeople to understand the choices we're making. So if in fact I see something that I'm thinking is very important, we want to discuss it further, and I don't want to continue with the aggressive schedule. If I vote for this now, am I committing myself to this schedule?
So this
Are they mutually
RFP,
exclusive?
so this RFP is the vote that we're requesting tonight is to solicit it out to the architects.
Like getting quotes.
Right, getting quotes. So they're gonna come back with their quotes based on the timeline that we give them. And then we're gonna have to make another vote. We're gonna have to decide,
If we're still gonna do it, because there's,
we're gonna have to decide which architect to do the concept plan
Right,
for us.
right,
So there's gonna be another vote,
another vote,
and then there's gonna be another opportunity at the end,
to
okay?
evaluate what they.
Right, exactly. So I don't know if that really answers your question about the timeline.
No,
But
I
I think there'll be future opportunity to comment
discuss
on the
timeline independently.
Yeah, I don't think this vote is gonna lock us into that end timeline, if that's what you're concerned about.
It seemed that way, but maybe I
Yeah.
misunderstood.
Do you
Thank
want to
you.
add to that, Scott, what I just answered for Peter? He's concerned about the timeline of locking in the March referendum. If we vote on this to approve the RFP tonight, that doesn't necessarily lock us into a March referendum, right?
I mean, the overall schedule of this project is at the discretion of the committee. I'm just trying to give you a pathway to the goal. But if you tell me, Scott, show me a schedule for X, I will create that schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so
Sorry,
we
Catherine.
have a motion on the floor. We have a second to approve the RFP with the edits that were discussed this evening. So I'm hearing no additional discussion on the item, so are we ready to take a vote? All right, so all in favor of approving the draft RFP from Scott Pellman with the additional comments that were made this evening, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Thank you. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thank you all. So down to 7B under old business, potential swing space locations. So this was brought up by one of our committee members, so it's on the floor for discussion. All right, Erica?
So I know at our last meeting, which was 2 weeks ago, there was, we'd said, let's get some feedback in some places. Did you receive any comments from members on potential? swing
No, I
spaces?
have not. I have, actually, let me see if Mike sent me an email tonight. I don't know.
Right. And then I would like to hear from our superintendent, if he's up to that discussion, of what would be needed in a swing space for educating our current hall school students. Because before I could determine if we had an adequate swing space, I need to know what it needed to have from the perspective of our superintendent.
And from a construction perspective, I'll offer my feedback as well, but let's see if they'll,
Yeah, I think Scott's kind of touched on this tonight. Really, if you're looking at an alternate site, you need some sort of administrator on site, but you also need to meet the education needs of students in that facility, both curricularly and from a security standpoint. But you need to have bus access and drop off. You need bathrooms. You'd have to have a system to have some sort of cafeteria or an area for students to eat. Any of the unified arts classes, some of those classes could be done in a classroom, but not always. There's a significant number of things that would need to be done. And I know Scott has touched upon this before, is really need to make sure it meets the educational needs of the students. And I don't know that we have any, and it's going to cost money. So it's not like I don't know that there's any facility in town that I know of right now that we could walk into today and start educating students.
And if I can ask a follow-up.
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
Phil, does the state have a say in where we would educate our students? Do they have input?
That I don't know. Scott, do you know if, I mean, I would imagine we have to meet certain, code requirements if we're moving into a new location.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be authority having jurisdiction, you know, from a safety standpoint.
I mean, and I say this mainly because many of our town facilities have ADA deficiencies. This building certainly does, look, we talked about all the needs in a school for pre-K through 1 students. That would, I assume, be the same in a temporary facility that they go into. So, you know, I want to make sure if we're really going to consider this, that we know all of the needs that need to be met. And the educational needs cannot be discounted here. They are, what we're doing is educating students. So we need to make sure we have the adequate space. And I too, I'm concerned that we don't have one place in town. We can hold a large scale meeting. So I don't know where else in town we could possibly educate, you know, over 200 students adequately.
Thank you. Any other comments regarding this item? Peter?
Yes, I obviously asked for this to be on the agenda. And unfortunately, I'm not fully understanding this. I know we've had discussions about it in the past, at the risk of Phil troubling you to answer while you're not feeling well. I'll direct this to Scott, because I'm assuming, Scott, you looked at this, and the only swing space you were able to identify working with Phil was in Hall School. My question is, when you were looking at that, how short are we once we've exhausted all the space we have available in Center School? If we could use Center School to house some of those students that would be in Hall School for swing space, how many additional classrooms would we still need based on what's available in Center School?
Are you assuming?
I think we've responded, I think Phil has responded to this in the past, that my understanding is, and again, you know, hopefully maybe Phil can chime in, that there really is no additional space at Center School. In addition, a middle school model, you don't just have a homeroom or you stay in a room every day, but the students change classes. There's a lot of teaming aspects of it. So you can't just take portions of a middle school or teams and transfer them down to another facility. It disrupts the educational process of the middle school model.
I fully appreciate, may I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I fully appreciate all the educational considerations. I think the community would also like to see some kind of effort here, given that swing space is only temporary, and that there would be some sort of spirit of cooperation here and utilizing town assets to do something like this that could be effective for everyone. So, for example, I'm wondering, and I asked this question last time, and I guess was ridiculed. We have had kindergarten classes in the firehouse facility that has like a cafeteria and a kitchen and a large space and facilities. And if Center School was relieved of, and I don't have a sense of this other than my notes from when I toured the building. And again, I was told that my notes were inaccurate. If, for example, we housed kindergarten in that building as we had in the past, would that create opportunity for the use of those classrooms that are being used for kindergarten for swing space for other grades that could be moved into Center School? I was thinking also of the library, which is a large facility, where there could be, did we look at any of those options, or did we just say we're not doing it and utilize these bureaucratic responses I'm hearing about why we can't do anything that isn't educationally sound. That any swing space would have to meet the requirements of a new school, from what I'm hearing. And I'm not so sure the existing space in Hall School even meets that criteria.
I really think it's appropriate for Phil to respond to it as far as what type of spaces or activities could be separated out throughout the district to still maintain what he needs to provide from an educational standpoint. I would be happy to look at any building or scenario. I was not made aware that there were any other possibilities from that standpoint, but again, I think really it's an educational question that needs to be addressed by Phil.
Well, I think this is an item that is brought up as a swing space location. I think we should hear about some more ideas that maybe the rest of the committee might have. Because that is an idea that Peter brought to the table. Does anybody else have any ideas? Brianna?
I just had comments about kindergarten in the firehouse, so I will hold.
Go ahead, you can comment on that.
Yikes comes to mind. There's lots of reasons why that for me as an educator of kindergarten students would be very challenging and near impossible in my professional opinion, actually. This year we had to add a kindergarten class because we had an influx of students joining the Willington kindergarten group. So that means there are 3 classes, 3 teachers, 3 groups of kids that would propose putting in that space. We can't shut down the firehouse, which means you're putting youngsters in a working firehouse facility, which creates a lot of safety concerns for me and traumatic ones, perhaps for some kiddos, though it would be exciting for others, I'm sure. You have to have a school nurse on site or an administrator has to be there to serve that purpose. And the kitchen that you mentioned, Peter, would have to be staffed, of course, by people who have been trained and put through training is the best word, I guess, for school provided food. The bathrooms in there are pretty ancient and they are not child-sized. And students with IEPs or 504s will have special accommodations or modifications that are required, and they will need to be able to go to services or have services brought to them, which would be very difficult to do in the firehouse space, such as having a speech and pathologist come work with the child. There's not really anywhere that they could do that privately. And if you're not going to have those service folks come to that location, then that means you've got a bunch of kids who have to walk outside across parking lot to get to those services. And that's definitely not fair and equal for the other children that are in the district who can just easily walk down the hall to those service providers. So that's just a couple of things that came to mind, and I'm happy to answer any more questions if you feel that I have the qualifications with which to do so.
Erica?
So the makeup of this committee is broad, and it's broad for a reason. And we have a member of our staff represented here. So I would, Chris, if you would like to speak to this, I think your voice is really important here because I can't say enough, Peter, that it bothers me that you think that the discussion about educational needs, which is what we're doing, is educating students, is looked at as bureaucratic work, because it's important for us to ask if we meet the educational needs to educate our students. And while the firehouse was adequate pre-1980, I'm not sure that, 45, 50 years later, things haven't changed and it's not still the same. And we cannot discount the voices of educators on this committee so that we make sure we're always doing right by our students.
Thank you, Erica.
Eric, are you directing a question to me?
If you're willing to speak to it, I think.
No, I can't. Sure. I mean, I appreciate what Brianna shared. I think that's can be shared across grade levels, not just with kindergarten. Especially her points about special education. Myself being a special education teacher, so I can kind of validate those facts. I think the other piece that we're really looking at is we would need multiple classrooms in such a place like center school to house even just one grade level. We have, you know, teachers with multiple expertise, math, language arts, science, social studies. So when we talk about curricular expectations, you know, we have guidelines that we're trying to meet that are state guidelines in these areas, and to execute those so that the students are successful and they are able to achieve to those state regulations and expectations. We need to supply that type of education. We need to have the science lab. We need to have, you know, those classrooms that are specific to those skill sets to make sure that they do meet those requirements. I know it sounds like we would be able to maybe, you know, simplify things, but if we do that, are we asking to that the students hold the bag, like the sacrifice for that? And I'm not sure if that's what we're looking at doing if we do that, but just a little bit more in that topic is what I can share that comes to mind.
Thank you, Chris. Does anybody know of any potential swing space locations? Peter, besides the firehouse? No, you mentioned it, so that's why.
Well, I guess I'll answer that question with a question, if I may, to Scott. Scott, based on your experience in situations where swing space is sought, meeting all the requirements that I think the very well represented educational group on our committee has stated, I fully appreciate that. Is it ever commonplace, Scott, or considered to, if there's a vacant educational facility within a reasonable distance, would that be considered for a swing space in a situation like this? Say it was a school that, well, I'll just use an example. I'm thinking of the Depot campus, for example, that UConn has. If there was a,
You don't want to go there.
I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah, okay.
If there was an educational facility with classrooms and a cafeteria and or Chris mentions with science lab facilities, if that existed and it was available, could students be transported to that location if it was within a reasonable distance to provide swing space? Does that ever occur in your experience?
Well, you're talking about a hypothetical situation. I mean, I think, you know, I have worked in municipalities, larger cities, where they had a vacant building across town or another building was used and fitted out for swing space for doing multiple projects. I mean, I think really honestly, there's a lot of factors you'd have to look into as far as time on buses, you know, the location, is the building, you know, appropriate for the specific grade levels? Again, if there was a facility that you're aware of, you know, and an agreement can be sought or at least brokered for an initial discussions on that possibility, I would be more than happy to take a look at the facility and offer my professional opinion from a construction standpoint. And then certainly I think you'd look to your educators and your superintendent to talk about how that might work from an educational standpoint, as well as you know, busing and all the other intangibles that would come with a relocated facility.
Can I just add to Scott's point?
Go ahead, Phil.
That is not a school building committee decision. I just want to be clear about that. That is a Board of Education decision. The school building committee can recommend a separate site, but the Board of Education has to approve it, not the school building committee.
Thank you, Phil. And I was just gonna ask the question, which I think I know the answer to. Any costs associated with making a move if we were to find another spot. None of that is reimbursable, right?
I know I've asked questions probably ad nauseam to Scott about portables, and I hear Scott and Phil say there are certainly lots of safety concerns. I know other towns have utilized that system. It does come at a great cost, so that is another potential option for us, right, is portables. Not ideal, at least a possibility. I wish we had a space in town where we could make that an option, Peter. I just don't see an adequate space. I know one of the things that was tossed around our last meeting was this building. Look in this room. It currently has 4 different purposes right now being utilized in this space. And so at any given time in the day, it needs to be used. And we don't have a lot of other space to move the activities that are happening in this room. So, there would be so much disruption for us, in my opinion, to move kids and students and educators, because there is a lot of overlap, or even to recommend ed, to put them into multiple areas around town and the requirements that come from that. It's just concerning to me, and I see multiple safety concerns if we're moving them to 3 or 4 different places around town. If we had a place, I think we would have been discussing that from the get-go, making that recommendation.
Thank you, Erica. Ralph? You're muted.
Okay, how's this? Does that work?
Better.
All right, I'm gonna go out on a limb a little bit and comment on this topic as much as I really don't want to. If we were to find a educational facility that could house all of the students in one facility that had the basics of what's needed to meet the educational needs, whether we had to bus them across town line to something very close, or whether these students ultimately face being bused out of town anyway to Region 19, I don't see that as a big deal. But finding that facility is another challenge. Now, enough discussion. I move the question.
There is no question.
There's no question.
There's no question.
I thought we had a motion on this RFP. Did we get past that?
Well, the
We
RFP
voted
was,
on it.
yeah,
Okay.
voted on that. This one is item
I'm
17.
sorry.
Yeah, this is just.
I am sorry. I just got a little sidetracked listening to all of this. Never mind.
But to your point, we can ask that very same question. If anybody does know of a facility that Ralph was describing, it sounds like it would be perfect. There's a couple issues with finding a facility. Let's say that there was a vacant school that had everything we needed, and the only thing we had to work out was the busing. That still would essentially be a nightmare, and any costs that would be associated with relocating an entire school or entire group of classes to allow us time to work on hall, all of that cost is not reimbursable. So that would be in addition to the costs that we're already seeing for renovating hall. That's just something to keep in mind. I think the discussion has been very good. It would be great if we could find another option to decrease that schedule on hall. Part of the reason why it's so lengthy is because we have no swing space, and we're working in an existing condition there. But is there any other discussion about finding swing space for potential swing space? And then we will move.
Anna has her hand up.
I think
Brianna?
Brianna has her hand up.
If we had a viable option that meets those requirements or expectations or wishes that you just described, Catherine, don't you suppose we would have that down as option 3 with Scott?
Well,
So if that's nowhere, if that's nowhere and it's not one of our options, trying to put a pre-K to 8 together, then
No, it
suppose
wouldn't
it's no-
be. It would be 5 to 8.
But our charge is pre-K to 8.
But I
For the
think we're talking
facility,
about the swing space for 5 to 8, right, to get them out of
Right.
hall school while we renovate. That's what I'm
correct. That's my point.
talking about. But I would think, to Brianna's point, if Phil had an option where we could do that and it would change the timeline,
Right.
I think that would have been suggested already. We know the space is challenging here. And it's just more difficult than we'd like to think, to pick up kids and just plop them in a room and educate them.
Right, and I know this isn't the first time that we've talked about swing space. I think in our early discussions, I don't know which meeting it was, but we did talk about what is the available swing space, and I think we came out silent. There was nothing at that time. So it's been brought up again tonight to see if there's any new findings in swing space. And like I said, there has been a good discussion. Is there any other discussion on this topic before we move on?
Final
Yep, go ahead, Peter.
comment or question. If swing space was identified that met all the basic criteria that we've heard from numerous folks tonight that understand those things better, it's still, based on Phil's final comment, could be rejected by the Board of Ed.
And it wouldn't be reimbursable, any of those costs wouldn't be, so we'd have to consider that into the,
I understand the additional cost,
Yeah.
but even if we found a suitable site, if the Board of Ed decides
right,
they don't prefer to do that, then it's not a viable option.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Peter. All right, one last comment, Ralph, or
No. I want to move on.
Ron? Okay. All right, so new business, item A, phase 2 environmental study for a private parcel. So we did receive the environmental study for the phase 1, which recommended additional phase 2. I don't know if the committee recalls, but we had seen some cost proposals initially on the phase 2. And we opted to do the first portion, or a limited phase 2, which we have performed on the proposed site. That report was also sent to the entire committee along with the proposal from Eagle Environmental. And their findings from the limited environmental phase 2 site assessment was that they needed to do additional testing. And so the cost proposal that I had sent to the committee is for that additional testing. It outlines all the costs in there for the line item. Eagle Environmental has given us that cost proposal. It is a continuation of their services. So tonight, I would like to make a motion to move to approve the cost proposal from Eagle Environmental for the phase 2 site assessment of the proposed new parcel located on Adamac Road, Lot 9, in the amount of $27,525. So there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Discussion? Peter?
Well, I guess my question is this premature? We don't know which path we're taking yet. We don't have our concept plans yet. Can't this wait till a later date when we have a better idea of where our direction is before we expend $27,000?
So part of the reason we're doing this, if you guys haven't heard the question, is why,
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not see
yeah,
it?
why we have to do it now, essentially.
Yes, before we commit to a particular direction.
So part of the reason is that we're trying to identify any environmental concerns for this parcel before we present it to the public. And it needs to be included in our budget and our total cost for the project. So for example, if we don't go and continue our due diligence on this particular parcel, we won't ever know if there's 500,000 of environmental remediation, or if there's 50,000 of environmental remediation, or if there's 0 environmental remediation on the new site. We need to know that before we recommend anything to the public. Scott, I don't know, you want to add to that, Scott?
No, I think that's pretty clear.
Okay, Ralph, I saw your hand up.
Okay, I have 2 Eagle proposals in front of me for a phase 2. Now, I thought we had done the phase 1 environmental study on the parcel. I did not know, or I don't recall, that we approved a limited phase 2.
We did.
That was quoted out at 4854. Now,
Yeah,
you
and that was
just
approved in one of our previous meetings.
okay, fine. I have not seen a proposal that comes to 27,000. I have
That was
one
just-
here for
just
21,833.
I was just
When was-
issued tonight, Ralph,
When was that issued to the members of this committee?
tonight, probably 5 o'clock.
But we're discussing it now.
We're discussing it, yeah. And I did ask the question, I think much to what Peter was asking, is why do we have to do this now? This is actually a requirement of our state application. So it is a requirement that we do a environmental phase 1. If it recommends that you have to do environmental phase 2, you have to do that.
I get that. I'm not questioning why we have to do this. I'm questioning the fact that quote has gone from 21,833 to 27, whatever. And we didn't see it until tonight, and I have not had an opportunity to review it. So quite honestly, at this point in time, I would not support voting on this.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments about the motion that's on the floor and the second? We're in discussion right now for this item. Okay, so let's do a roll call vote because we'll start with the vote. So Erica?
Abstain.
Brianna?
Aye.
Anne?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Ralph?
No,
Peter?
No,
Justin?
Aye.
And I'm a yes. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, 2 noes, and 1 abstain. So motion carries. All right, item B, community outreach schedule and timeline. This was put on the agenda to hopefully identify some dates of when our next community outreach will be. We had a successful first presentation presented by Phil and Scott from Colliers on November 9th. And we'd like to propose some additional times to do the community outreach for December and January. Those are really the next 2 opportunities we have. I'm not sure that we could squeeze one in before the end of November, but we'd like to take some ideas of what the committee thinks. I was wondering if we were able to use one of our regular meetings to have the presentation, much like we did for the November 9th. Erica?
I'm not opposed to using one of our meetings. Maybe we could, have a short working meeting prior for some items that may need to be attended to, right? That might be important. I would like to suggest that we look at a weekend day. I think, a Saturday. You heard me say I need to hear from more people. We have to meet people where they're at. And I think not everyone is available during the week on a weeknight. Let's recognize that. And, some of our older residents may not travel at night as well. And we already know that using Zoom is not, for some, their preferred method of engagement. So I'd like to see us look at a potential Saturday. And I would like to see us maybe schedule something, even if it's smaller scale, at the senior center and try to meet some of those folks in the senior housing area and an ability for them to meet maybe on a smaller scale with the committee. So again, as broad a reach as possible. And can I ask you, Scott, are those kinds of proposals I'm making unusual? Are they typical?
No, those are typical. I mean, you should look for alternative times, locations. Sometimes what we do is the building committee, so, a member or two will volunteer, take the presentation or a list of talking points, go out to the senior centers, get to where people are, look for those alternative ways of reaching the community. So that is spot on as far as Eric, as far as your suggestions.
And I'm also thinking, to what Scott's saying, obviously smaller scale, I hadn't thought of that and was trying to figure out how we could do that during the day, but during the daytime, right? So, and I just really want to meet people where they're at and hear from as many people as we can. I don't want people to feel disenfranchised in this process. And so that's where I stand there.
All right, any other feedback? Ann?
I would kind of like to go along with Scott's timeline. He had some dates that he was suggesting, like January 25th, and then also another one following up our December 7th meeting. And Erica, question for you. Would that be our basic program that we just had at the senior center, kind of a repeat of that for them to have a chance to get on board? Or
That would be my decision, and I would say that would be up to this committee. I think it wouldn't be inappropriate since it's probably safe to say that a lot of them didn't see that full presentation. So, maybe we can do that during the day and, Phil could, go out there and present that and answer as many questions as possible. I certainly can avail myself during the day and then bring those questions back to the committee that couldn't be answered. But, I think what we do for presentation there would be up to this committee, not to me.
okay, yeah. So we were December 7th. There was something that was going to happen December 7th, Scott, that you thought might have a good follow-up for a public meeting.
Selection of the concept plans.
Right.
Okay, so share the concept plans with the public at that point?
No,
No, we would-
December 7th would be selection of the architect.
Oh, the architect, okay,
We're getting the RFP out this Friday. We're giving them 2 weeks, which is pretty tight, to get a response back. We get those back in the 5th. We discuss those at the building committee meeting on the 7th. You make a selection, and then we get them going on that part of the project.
okay,
It really, the placeholders I put in kind of followed up after PVC meetings, but again, I think, it would be important, once that financial information, the impact of the taxpayers has been generated, that's probably the next key datum that you want to get out to the public. But certainly if there's an alternative date or time where maybe even the same presentation could be undertaken, prior to having that information done, then that could be worthwhile.
We really have December and January to get out there. And if we use our regular meeting, December 7th, to do another public presentation, and maybe it is the same one that Phil did on the 9th, but it answers some of the questions that were asked of that meeting. And then the next one, if we wanted to do a special meeting on December 14th, we could always do that and continue with that same concept. The questions that came from the December 7th meeting get answered in the December 14th meeting. And then as we gather new information, we can update that presentation.
Scott, what do these presentations look like, right? This is obviously this committee's first time working through this whole process. What does that look like? Are we out of tune with what we should be discussing, or should we be taking the same presentation? Because except for answering some questions, the information hasn't wholly changed, and just taking that from date to date.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially, if there was another presentation done in a different location, maybe a different time frame, yes, taking the same presentation that was done last Wednesday. But again, what I would do is I would probably start out each presentation with a list of those questions and responses. So address the previous questions that were heard at a previous meeting and then go into the presentation. So, I think there's certainly some value of getting the same presentation out in a public forum again. And then what you may do is you may pare it down a little bit because there was a lot of information there. It may focus a little bit more on just timeline, cost, maybe gets a little bit further away from the educational aspects of it. The ed spec focuses a little bit more on the project itself, the timing, and the cost. So you take some of those slides out and you pare down the presentation.
Thank you, Scott. Ralph?
Okay, with all that's on this committee's agenda between now and the drop dead date for a referendum, and we've been at this now for 2.5 hours, and we're going to do a public outreach before or after our two plus hours discussing committee business. I think any public presentation should be separate from our regular meetings. I don't want to be doing a presentation till 11 at night because we've had to go through our own stuff first.
I'm gonna agree with Ralph on this one.
Whoa.
The Board of Ed, when they did their initial presentation out first time, I then I did the presentation with the board, and then I did the traveling show with informational sessions. I did one at the senior center. We had some meet and greet kind of small group things at the library where people could just come in and ask questions. I'm glad to do the same presentation a couple times in different locations. And then maybe, and even I think I could do 2 of those in the month of December if you told me where. I think we could easily arrange the senior center. If you wanted to do one at the library on a weekend, to Erica's point. So then you've got 3 separate times. I think I did the one at the senior center around their lunchtime, and they had lunch or breakfast or something in the main room there. The Board of Ed did not attend those though, so it wasn't like it was a posted meeting. It was just an informational session. I'm glad to do that if you want me to do that. I think when we present new information, we have answers to questions and or we are adding significant financial information such as mill rate or tax impact. That should be this full committee. That's my opinion. That might be something where we could present just that portion in a meeting, and then again take that and go out and do a traveling roadshow again kind of into January. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Phil.
I agree.
Ann?
Phil, it might be good to add the PTA to your list. They could even be part of the library presentation.
Honestly, wherever we're going to get people, that's the bottom line.
Catherine, can I ask how, members of the committee, do they support that kind of proposal from Phil? We pick some key dates, because we're gonna get big financial information, right? That's gonna need to be a big meeting. Maybe we set some of those and then, set in motion this little traveling roadshow at the same time. And I hesitate and don't to say that some of those brief informational sessions could be recorded if need be. I think we have capabilities too, but.
Thank you. Brianna?
I'm just wondering if the communications subcommittee might be able to put together, I want to say, a magnet or something that lists our website, the Facebook page, how to get to the Willington Wire, all of the different ways that people can find information quick and easy. And I don't know if it's appropriate, it seems like it is to me, but we have some winter performances from our musicians at Hall School coming up in the next month or so. Maybe we can put out a trifold or something. Even that item that I just mentioned would be good. So when people are coming in, they can grab some information or find out when our next presentation is going to be. Something like Phil said, we need to find the people and make sure they have plenty of information and opportunity to come listen and hear and ask questions.
Thank you, Brianna. Did you have something, Peter?
Yes, I'm kind of thinking that just regurgitating that long presentation by Scott and Phil at every meeting doesn't seem right to me. It's now on the town website. It's all there for people to review. Can we have a condensed version of the basic elements of that? That could be a handout, because in my mind, and I think I sort of agree with Phil, but I'm hesitant to say that. It makes more sense to me for future outreach meetings to focus on two things: cost and the two options. What these schools would look like and what they cost, I think will be of great interest to people. How we got here, how many times are we going to discuss that? That we have the narrative, can we just have a handout? So we don't have to, we can focus on those two important issues. Which project do people like? So we can get that feedback.
Yeah.
And what do they cost? That's going to generate a lot of conversation. I'd like to see that versus rehashing the narrative or the Willington wire or Scott's presentation was great. But I think everyone's want to skip to the end where the numbers are. And I'd like to see it focus on that. And I'm trying to get a sense again, when do we think we'll have the concept plans done? What's that date?
January 25th, I believe.
So we could have a couple of meetings not knowing that. And the idea of talking about the cost, but not knowing what either project looks like doesn't make sense to me.
So don't forget that it's in addition to what we already have. So we already do have concept plans, and all due respect with what you think is important, there may be other
Just
people.
my opinion.
Right, yeah. There may be other community members that really want to focus on the ed specs, or they really want to focus on one other aspect of that presentation. I think we need more community feedback before we start chopping up that presentation. While it is long and while there is a lot of information in it, I think it's important to continue sending that message to people and getting more community feedback.
I have no doubt, I have no doubt that we may come across someone at the senior center who comes there who doesn't know how we got here, and that's going to be important to them, just as important as the numbers are. That at the end of the day, that's what we're looking at, but we can't discount having the whole piece of information. And again, I'll reiterate, the concept plans are not what the school is going to look like. Those concept plans will not be what the final outcome will be. That will be the product of that architect. That may not be the final architect that we have. So we have to be clear that if we put something out there, that we make people know by the time we get to a design, it may not look like what we showed you in a January meeting. That was a concept plan, and that will be the property of that particular architect. I think we touched on that. That's important for folks to know, that we can show them something shiny and pretty, and it may not at all look like the school. And I think, Mansfield is probably our closest example of that. They used a concept, they had it built into their plan from the beginning, so they were prepared for it in their public presentations. And it's not at all the school that they're actually constructing currently. So it was used for visuals as part of the process. I think Scott talked to us about how that, some districts choose to go in that direction.
Right, and we do have concept plans now.
Right.
This extra step of going to architects is to enhance that concept plan. So it's not like we don't have anything to present to the public. Were there any, so Anne, go ahead.
I think we can look forward to our next big event, kind of like the event we just had, which might include information like the financial impact, the mill rates, maybe then kick off the new concept plans, and then any other, and then maybe follow that with a survey so we could get a pulse on what the community's feeling about the two options.
Thank you, Anne.
Could we set the big, like, whole committee meetings? Can we kind of set what those look like now? And hearing Ralph and Phil and kind of agreeing with them, although I'm willing to sit here till 11 o'clock, it may not be the best use of our time. And pick some dates that we think could work for those larger presentations. I wish Phil, I could give you a date. We have the financial information, but we don't have that yet.
So our next regular meeting is December 7th. So if we don't want to combine it with our regular meeting, we could opt to postpone our regular meeting and use that regular meeting date as the presentation, like, kind of like what we did on this last one. That's one option. Or we could have a regular meeting on December 7th and then have a special meeting on December 14th. But that would give us one community outreach in December.
Is the 30th of November, so that's 2 weeks from today. Is that too soon? I mean, we're talking about moving into December.
Will we have the financials available by then?
I don't know. I wish I had a date, I really do, but I don't.
What was
When
the
we spoke to
question?
our business manager, it was, still a couple of weeks. And so,
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Would the financials be available
Oh.
from,
the mill rates.
that might be a good reason to have a meeting.
Yeah, but we know, even if there's only 100 views on that video and about 50 people in attendance, we have a population of 5,500 people. So we still need to do a big presentation like we did to start to more people. Even if we don't have the financials, am I the only one that thinks that we still need to give the whole big presentation to more people and give more people the opportunity to attend?
Yeah. Yeah, we just got to come up with some proposed dates. I mean, I can take some of the feedback that we had here and propose some dates in an email, or we could just talk about it now. Let's put something on the schedule for our next date. Our next regular meeting is, like I said, December 7th. So we could do, the earliest would be December 14th. Unless there's an opportunity in November, which
Is the 30th an option? Would that not be a good date? Does anyone not see?
12/7 is the day we're just discussing selection of an architect for the concept plan. That sounds like a busy meeting to me.
yeah,
So could we do a public session before that in December?
there isn't.
Nothing.
Oh, you mean like
Could we, right? Could we do?
December 5th, maybe?
That's what I was thinking. So something
No,
earlier. in December.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes,
If
please.
you're not gonna all attend this meeting, no offense to all of you, I don't think the date matters for you.
Hmm.
What matters is where if the public presentation is gonna be at the senior center, they may say, we have an event on December 3rd, that's when we want you there.
Mhm.
And that's when you should do it. So instead of us going through 14 dates right now, I think what matters more is the format. What do you want the format? If you're talking about the big money presentation, that I agree. If it's not ready for December 7th, then maybe you have a special meeting on the 14th. But if you're talking about a similar presentation that's already been done, I can help set those dates if you want me to do that presentation. I can talk to the senior center. I can talk to the library. Maybe they have a program going on that I can piggyback off of. And if you try and set the date now, we won't know that.
Yeah, Phil, that would be great.
Okay, glad to do that.
Thank you.
I think that's separate than what I was suggesting, Phil. Do we not want to do another big presentation to gather more people in? And even if it's not the whole committee, we still only have about 100 people, maybe 150 people who've looked at this presentation. Is it not worth having one more middle of the week evening big presentation on top of those small ones that you're going to do, Phil? Which I agree, we don't need to hatch out when to do that. I'm just trying to figure out, let's put something on so we can let people know when else they can come.
Well, I think that's what he was talking about, but
Yeah,
I think
Erica, I'll do 3 of them.
he was talking.
I don't care. I'll do 3
Yeah.
of them. I will do one full presentation at the senior center. I'll do one on the Saturday. And I'll do one on a non-Wednesday night, because that's what we did the first time, was a Wednesday night. So
Okay.
I'm glad to do those. It's just a matter of, I can set those dates as long as you tell me you're okay with me doing multiple presentations, and whoever can attend can attend.
Okay, so you're saying let's hold off on the whole committee plan presentation until we have financial information. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. And, you know, I'll work to narrow down that timeline as best we can.
Okay. Are we good to move to future business? All right, items for future agenda. I think we had one on here that came up earlier. Anybody have any suggestions for future agenda items?
Yes.
Right, Peter? Put on future agenda. Oh,
If you could-
election of the chair. That's gonna be on the
Oh.
future agenda.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Peter.
I would like to add to our next agenda discussion of the Fryer report.
Anything specific about the Fryer report?
Yes, I'd like to revisit that report in the context of the ed specs that we now have.
Okay, any other future agenda items? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to present to speak. I would be curious if there is anybody on the phone that would like to speak. I would be curious what your feedback would be on the community outreach. So if you would like to speak, just unmute yourself, state your name and where you live, and we'd love to hear from you. James?
Yep. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Apologies, it doesn't look like you're gonna get camera. I'm trying. Everything gave out while I was waiting for this meeting. So yeah, hi guys, James Marshall, 46 Fisher Hill Road. I just want to start out by saying thanks for the presentation. And it's been good to meet some of you in person over the past couple of weeks, you know, at these meetings. So sorry, I got a list. I'll try to be as brief as I can. So just from my perspective, you know, based on the discussion for the architect RFP tonight, you know, I will say, from my perspective, it is quite aggressive, particularly considering you're looking at a holiday schedule and holiday timeframe for everybody, as well as some of the, you know, civil consultants and coordination you may need to entertain. You know, 2 weeks to prepare an RFP or to prepare a response to a qualifications and RFP, you know, with sincerity is aggressive but doable. The bigger concern is, you know, how much value you're going to get out of a 3-week turnaround on an initial design concept for multiple options over a holiday schedule without the opportunity for too much community or school building committee buy-in and feedback. You know, so there's, it really depends on how the RFP is crafted. I obviously haven't seen it. So it depends on what level of detail you're really specifying in there, but it's very aggressive. So I just would prepare yourselves to be somewhat tempered in expectations on what you may get out of it, given the time frame available. The other thing I'd say, I know you guys just had a big conversation about what these presentations can look like. What you really need, my personal opinion is really just being available for questions and answers and hearing community input and feedback as often as possible will be very beneficial. I don't think you necessarily even need to regurgitate the same presentation. It is available online, but you can have it as a background and give an overview statement and then hear what people want to say. And just be able to hear those conversations. You'll drum up more support, more enthusiasm one way or the other, and raise awareness of this thing by making yourself available as much as possible, even if it's not the full committee. Phil's traveling roadshow is a great idea. Sorry, Phil, I hope you feel better. So a couple of things based on just the presentation, and I'm sorry, I'm going to drag out a little bit. I will say, based on what you guys, you're looking for community input on these two options. And speaking as a community member, there's really, based on the information you guys have presented to date and what's available out there publicly, I gotta say there's really almost no choice between these two options. It really is option one for viability for me. That's not to say there isn't any value in Hall School, and I do hope we address opportunities for doing something with Hall, even if it's not a school. I think personally it would be a great municipal complex for the town instead of center. If Hall Foundation is willing to entertain that down the line, I think it's something you need to address. And I think having those community members that have a fondness for Hall School and support, acknowledging that there's something to be done for Hall and it's not just going to be abandoned, will only provide further support for a new school program. One of the big items I think you guys, I think it would be beneficial to hear more about is you've given the top line numbers, you've given the reimbursement rates and potential reimbursement rates for both options, but there's going to be a lot of talk about what the breakdown of those items may be in a little bit more detail. I mean, I know Scott's probably in a very good place for where these are at, but I think, just doing a summary spreadsheet saying, here's where this building cost is coming from, here's where the site cost is coming from, really, it doesn't need to be a detailed breakdown, but further breakdown besides the top line number would be beneficial so that people can understand clearly that you've got soft costs included in that is really total project. You've got soft costs, you've got FF&E, designer fees are in there, what the site purchase cost is. Just it's probably like 10 items, on a summary breakdown for these two options. I think it would be beneficial separately from the breakdowns, and it would just alleviate a lot of questions that I think you're going to get over and over again as to where the funding is going and why it costs as much. Sorry, now I feel like I'm rambling. But I think that's very worthwhile. I did have one other. The other thing that's really important is really making this about the educational need. Because I think a lot of the debate you're going to have is whether to do this project or to do nothing. And there's going to be a lot of concern about spending funding and why we can't just renovate what we have now. But really prioritizing the fact that this is providing a supportive and positive educational environment to the students beyond what just repairing what the current needs are at each facility. I think would really go a long way in rallying support behind a project in general. There really does need to be a distinction made that what you guys presented as whatever it was, $18 million in just urgent repair costs, that really is just putting a new roof on and repointing buildings and window replacements. And, but the scope of work is significant, but it really is just repair. It's not enhancements necessarily. So you're not apples to apples with a new school or an ad reno. Sorry, whatever the terminology is these days, I forget what it is in Connecticut. So I think it's really important. You got to, portraying the educational need and the value of a new school project is really important. And the other very important thing is an understanding that as somebody who's, my kids probably aren't going to have any use of this school facility. In all honesty, my son might have a couple of years, but they will feel an impact for a significantly long addition renovation project. It will be impactful to their, like, my daughter's just going to live in school in a construction site. And although it is manageable, it is not ideal. You know, it's not something I favor. I've seen the impact on that, and that is the reality of both renovations, significant renovations to each building, as well as, you know, a new K-8 program at Hall School. As would be swing space and splitting kids up, you know, the only way spring space becomes really cost effective to this project is if you had a readily available move-in ready facility in town that you could move the entire Hall School program into in the short term. Otherwise, you're going to be adding significant costs to this project for the renovation approach, option 2. That as well as educational disruption. So, sorry, I just realized I gave a lecture. I didn't mean to necessarily, but it's paying attention and just trying to hit on these points. So I appreciate your time, guys. And yeah, please just be available and answer questions to the public. That's the best you can do. So thank you.
Thank you, James. Nick Tello?
Nick Tello, 49 Myrtle. In regards to reaching out to the public and getting the public's engagement, just knowing how much work that went into the warehouse, you know, James, I, Carrie, there are many people, we know how much work that went into that to get involvement. And I just don't see that this school has an emotional tie to the people, unfortunately, to be able to really reach out and get 400 people to show up to a meeting. So I think it's going to be something where you guys got to connect an emotional tie to the people, because that's when people are going to respond and get their attention. Now, how do you hit that point? That's for you guys to come up with that. I personally still, you know, I keep on saying it, I still wish that we had numbers to cost comparison with a new school and renovating the hall, to have numbers for upgrading, because like I said, you know, those numbers, inflation, 16 million. Okay, I get that there's going to be other upgrades needed to be 21st century learning. Is that another 8 million? We're at 24 million. I just wish the public can see the cost comparison between those 3 options. I know we're gung-ho on a new school, but it's only fair to the taxpayers to see what are the 3 options. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else present to speak? All right, if you'd like to speak, just unmute yourself. Okay, hearing none. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting? So moved. So moved. Second? All right, let's take a vote. Any discussion?
But it's a non-debatable matter. You don't have, this is the one time you don't have to.
All right, all
We don't
right. All right, let's take a vote to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, the meeting is now adjourned. It is 9:25. Thank you all for coming and your feedback.
Thank you.
Good night.